I really just wanted to pop up and say thank you all very much for being here, because it's not like yesterday when we had this glorious former wonderful Demi-Mayor. Nice to see you over there, Carol. We had some nice little shocks last night. I don't know about the bumping and grinding, but I didn't feel them. I went over to Akaroa last night because the Volunteer Fire Brigade local fire chief got a 25-year Gold Star service. And we had people from all around the city, volunteer fire brigades, and from all around New Zealand, and it just made me realise once again that all of those different groups from Invercargill up to way up in the North Island had all been here through the first weeks of the recovery process after the 22nd of February. And they were also passionately interested in what are we doing and how far have we got and what are we seeing in the future. And whatever we do here, we have a massive degree of interest around the country, which is very exciting. But even more exciting than that has been watching over the last week the Share an Idea website and all of the ideas that are coming up in there and the creativity coming out of the city. So yesterday and today, we have a wonderful selection of speakers. They're going to give their views, their personal views, or they might represent a particular group. And getting all of these perspectives together is part of that creative process. We really want to have that creative tension. We need to know the extremes of the ideas in some cases in order to understand where the common themes are emerging. And it's so far, I'd say, that you could see a really strong theme around environmental values and building a green city and the idea of using garden more and more to strengthen what it is that our city stands for. Another really strong theme that I've seen emerging is around the not necessarily going for very high-rise buildings, but looking at buildings that are perhaps on a more human scale, certainly in the way that you interact with the people on the street. The very clear view that many people have that we need to have residential opportunities in the heart of Christchurch City. So as we move into the process, what will happen in the weeks ahead is that our engagement will begin to change. Having collected up all of these ideas, and there are thousands and thousands of them at the moment, and we're using a piece of quite smart software to help sift all the ideas into the appropriate categories that will then start to come back to our community and say, okay, well, here are some of the themes that are coming out. Now, what do you think about these themes? And how would you see that particular theme being expressed in your city? And it's so important for us as a council and a community to get this broad base of community vision. I look at it in a sense as the insurance for us as we go forward in the process, because it's going to be difficult to take out of all of this the stuff that we want to present back to you as a draft program, a draft central city plan for you to pull to pieces again. And we hope to start that process again at around about the end of July. And the overall timetable is for us to have completed the inside the Four Avenues plan so that it can effectively drop into our city plan by the end of the year. And of course it needs to get final sign-off by Sarah, and effectively that means sign-off by the Minister and thence into government. So we've engaged them all the way through this process as well, so they can see the thoughts, the ideas and the creativity that's flowing out of our community. So thank you very much for coming out on a cool Canterbury day and choosing to get engaged and choosing to support our speakers. We had, I don't know how many thousand people here yesterday, but my guess would be between 4,000 and 5,000 people over the day. If you add that to the close to 4,000 hits and comments now on the Share an Idea website, you get a great feel for the scale of interest in our community at the moment. So again, I thank you for being here. And are you going to do an intro, Mike, for our next wonderful speaker?
It would be rude not to.
It would be rude not to. And I just want to thank Mike, who has been with us all day yesterday, will be here again today. You must be picking up some themes yourself. What are you picking out in terms of what's coming back? Why don't you just give us 30 seconds on what you see?
Well, yeah, I would totally concur with your thoughts, Bob. Very much green and reinforcing the Garden City branding in a 21st century context. I think that is the most overwhelming theme I've picked up. There is a bit of debate and competitive spirit around the edges as to some of the shapes and design layouts of the central city. I think light rail one of your favourites, is looking pretty good. But I think it's a fascinating process, and I mean, quite often, you know, being a talkback host, the likes of people in my job, we're up against that inbuilt apathy of cities, but this has really confronted that apathy quite spectacularly, and I think the engagement level has been huge and extremely encouraging, and hey, it's a great way of finding something productive to do in these rather jittery times. Yeah.
No, thank you.
Alrighty, first of all, can I get a round of applause for one of our sign translators, Philippa, who was on on a rotator with Jenna through the day. Just a reminder, all of the speakers that we have both yesterday and today, the sessions will be available online on the shareanidea.org.nz website if you want to go back and look at some of the nuggets they have shared here. The general format for these sessions is very straightforward. Each speaker is given 15 minutes to provide you with their perspectives, their key points, and then it's a quick-fire 15-minute question and answer session for you to interact with. So feel free to keep a mental note of any particular points you want to get our speakers to clarify, any particular hobby horses of yours that you want to get their perspectives on. It's open season with those question and answer sessions. Without any further ado, it's a pleasure to welcome the manager of the Central City Business Association. Please welcome Paul Lonsdale. Cheers, Paul.
Thank you for coming along this morning to listen to me talk. Obviously, I'm going to be talking about the building blocks and the benefits of an iconic city. Obviously, the vision of the city must give the investors confidence if we want to reinvest into our city centre. Now, building an iconic city, I was thinking the other night when I was putting this together, what is iconic? I mean, it sounds expensive. And then the other question that rolled off from that was heritage. What actually is heritage? What is heritage is what is we build today in 100 years' time. We're quite a young city, so we can create new heritage that our future generations can be very proud of. Iconic doesn't necessarily mean expensive, but it does mean being very clever. Now, looking at the rebuild, we're going to look at some of the risks. The first risk that we should think about is the flight of capital that could leave the city. Property owners, they'll get their cheques from the insurance company to rebuild their building, and the risk is that they don't rebuild, and that's part of having a very good vision, one they actually really want to buy into. So we're going to make sure that vision inspires those investors, not only from our community but other communities, to reinvest into our city. The lack of or underinsured buildings. Now, some of those people won't have enough money to rebuild their property at all. That's going to cause a problem. Demolitions. The scale of the demolitions, the time it's going to take to pull those down and rebuild, the tall buildings, and the number of those are going to have to come down. How long do they take to come down? And that's going to hold up the city and could hold it to ransom if we don't make some clear decisions and get on with that job. And the threat of danger. There'll be a number of heritage buildings and old character buildings still standing. Now, the issue with those is that some people will perceive them as dangerous, and they may become untenable, which is another problem we have to think about. Now, first building block is to restrict the expansion of the suburban shopping centres and business parks, or at least until we get the city well underway and it's on track to be rebuilt. If we don't restrict their immediate growth, the opportunity for reinvestment into the city centre is severely weakened, and we need to incentivise brownfield development. Now, if you don't know what brownfield is, it's the opposite of greenfield. Brownfield is stuff that's already been built on. Greenfield is where they spread the city out further into the farmlands, and we need to encourage that back into the centre first before we actually start spreading out any further. Now, what started the decline of the city centre? Well, first of all, obviously they opened up industrial lands to allow them to put commercial and retail activity on those lands. And that had a massive, massive effect. And in the 7 years following from that, 85% of the development was happening out in the suburbs and only 15% in the city centre. That caused us a lot of problems. And they understood that with a bit of research, if they allowed that to continue, the decentralisation of office space and retail space in the suburbs, it was going to have a massive cost to the city. Not just to the city centre, but to the city, to the tune of $44 million per annum by the year 2028. Building block number 2, better access and parking. Commercial success is reliant on well-designed, strategically placed car parks for temporary and permanent parkers. The city should be given the same opportunities as the suburban centres, who actually provide good, adequate parking for their, and access for their customers. The private motor vehicle is still the primary mode of transport. You think of it yourself. If you go on a shopping experience to go and buy a TV, you take your car. You're not going to go on a bus. You're going to take your car. If you're going with the kids to go and get the groceries, you're probably going to take your car. It's just our geographical way our city's built. It's very easy to drive around, and it's quick and it's convenient. We need to think about turning some of the one-way systems back into two-way to allow that flow of traffic. Now you see on there the amount of suburban shopping centres we actually have here in Christchurch. It's exceptional. Now that's only just the major and the mini-major centres. That's not counting all the small wee centres you have in other parts of town. So we certainly got enough shopping in the city in Christchurch.